There is $1 million to first place, and you are here for the first game of the NFL season to figure out how to get some of that moolah. Look, you want some of those sweet dollar rooskies, and I've done 5 to 6 hours of research for this slate alone, so I've got you covered. This is everything you need to know for Thursday night's season opener. And let's begin with who is by far and away the best value on the slate, probably won't come in as the highest projected player, and believe it or not, it's Khalif Raymond, the Lions wide receiver, maybe 3, maybe 4 in this game at just $800. Khalif Raymond is a wide receiver who can play in the slot and out wide. He was basically 50-50 in those positions last year. And to start the season this year, he'll be rotating in with these players right here who kind of overlap each other's skill set. Josh Reynolds and Marvin Jones being a 33-year-old receiver who's not all that efficient, Josh Reynolds being a solid outside receiver for sure. And when Amon-Ra St. Brown goes to the outside, it'll be Raymond who slides into the slot for, maybe 20 routes in this game. And Raymond's been productive in the past couple of years in this role with the Lions. You can see last year 47 catches, the year before that 48 catches on a very solid 71 targets. The fella also had 2 top 20 finishes just a year ago and was 27th overall in the entire league in wide receiver efficiency. That's his yards per route run. Now, according to my DFS blueprint, he's projected to score about the same points as Sky Moore, who's $4,000 more. And he's not going to have the best matchup. This Kansas City Chiefs secondary is solid, but look at this. He got open last year versus man coverage, 31st in the league for a receiver that you probably don't know that much about. This is pretty good. Now, this next player you definitely know a lot about. He's probably the most recognizable player in the NFL now that Tom Brady is gone, and that's Patrick Mahomes, who, look, you get the highest projected player on the slate according to the DFS blueprint by over 7.6 points. I'm not the biggest fan of paying up for $12,000 quarterbacks, but an 8-point difference is pretty damn strong. And I mean, the fella has one of the best offensive lines in the league, and they added Juwan Taylor from the Broncos, who is a stud right tackle. They added a left tackle in Donovan Smith. He's going to have a very strong matchup against the Lions defensive line that is borderline bottom 10 in the league. Now, the defensive line does have talented players. I mean, you have the second year now of Aiden Hutchinson, who was great towards the end of his rookie year, but outside of that, not too much. And you get Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs with the highest total on the slate. The only team to have a 30-point total this week. They're 3 points higher than any other team. I mean, this just screams fantasy goodness. And in 27 career starts in similar situations as a 6-point favorite with a 30-point or higher total, Mahomes averages 311 yards and 28 fantasy points. And in those same environments, he rushes for over 24 yards per game. Right now on Prize Picks, his rushing yards number is set at just 16.5. So I like the more than on that number. And I also like pairing it up with Dak Prescott as a freebie this week. He's over under a half a passing yard. So you can go ahead and take this with the link in the description. If you're a first-time depositor, well, you'll get a free entry up to $100. And there you go. Our first official play of the year in the pick'em area is a Patrick Mahomes play, and his rushing yards, we want them more than. Man, oh man, it feels good to be talking this stuff again. Now we go to the next player, a rookie. Some of you might not know him if you're just getting back into football. Most of you probably do. Jamir Gibbs at $8,200 for the Detroit Lions. I like him. He's an elite pass catcher, and he's going to have the perfect start to his 2023 rookie year. Because this fella is known for his pass catching abilities, and he'll come into this game as a 6.5-point underdog, meaning the Lions are probably going to have to throw for most of this game. Definitely in the second half is what this is projecting, and they have a 23.5-point team total, which is solid. So they'll put up points and be throwing a lot because they should be trailing. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a fantasy wonderland spot for one Jamir Gibbs. And in 10 games last year in this similar role, in these similar game environments, DeAndre Swift was the running back, and he averaged 13.2 points in these contests. But Gibbs is a better running back than Swift, more dynamic and explosive. Take him with a top 12 pick in the first round instead of a second-round pick like Swift, and he's also still going to be running behind a top 5 offensive line, and basically like every dude on this line is a stud. Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker, the bigger ones, the best player on this line, the center, Frank Ragnow, Jonah Jackson is there. So I'm a fan of that rookie, and also this second-year player. And that's going to be a wide receiver who on these showdown slates in DFS have a lot of upside because of their ability to make one play, one big play you're going to have more often a 40-yard touchdown in the air than on the ground. It's just easier to beat a man one-on-one than a bunch of defensive linemen and linebackers. Sky Moore, $4,800. I want him. And check out this quote recently on August 30th from Brett Veach, his general manager. He says, right now, Sky Moore is one of those every down guys. He expects a big jump from him, so he is a starter, which is important because Mahomes starting receivers usually play pretty well. Last year, those starting receivers averaged over 50 yards per game and close to a touchdown per game. So it's Sky Moore and MVS as the clear starters here, meaning that Sky Moore is going to take Juju's role, which last year led the most overall targets of the wide receivers in the slot with over 60. And this Kansas City Chiefs team led the NFL in slot receiving yards last season. And like we said, Juju is gone, but so is McCole Hardman, who was number 3 in slot yards and targets for the team. So consider playing Sky Moore, who in college had a 45% dominator. That's top 10% of all time. He attributed nearly 50% of his team's offensive production. So we go from one young wide receiver to another one, but this guy's a lot more proven. And you'll have to pay for him, but really, he's only $10,200 for his type of ability to earn targets and not a lot of overall competition on his team. Amon-Ra St. Brown looks fantastic, battling an ankle injury, but fully expected to play week 1. Look, St. Brown was the number 2 graded wide wide receiver in the NFL just a year ago. And now his biggest threat for targets this season in the receiver department is suspended the first 6 games in Jamison Williams. St. Brown last year when he was actually healthy averaged 19 points a game, 10.5 targets per game, which would have ranked top 5 amongst wide receivers. And he was number 2 at earning targets versus man coverage. Only Tyreek Hill was better in the entire league. Now this specific game environment has Amon-Ra St. Brown with a nice team total 23.5 as a 6-point underdog. In 6 similar spots last year, he averaged nearly 19 points per game and over 9 targets per contest. That would easily put him in the winning lineup this year. Now, according to the fantasy blueprint, he's the 2nd highest projected player, even higher than Travis Kelce, even though he's like $2,000 cheaper, only behind Mahomes. Now, as we keep going, if you're finding this content helpful, make sure to hit the subscribe button. This is a new DFS channel we started last year, so you might not be subscribed. Now, speaking of Travis Kelce, he is the 2nd highest priced player, just $200 behind his teammate Patrick Mahomes. And look, he's going to have a massive 54-point total. In 28 career games in a similar environment, Kelce's averaging nearly 19 points per game. And he'll have a solid matchup against these Lions linebackers that currently are coming in around, maybe middle of the pack, maybe bottom third of the league, according to PFF, on their personnel to start the season. They have a new rookie, Jack Campbell, a first-round pick, but, unproven player. So you're getting the number 1 tight end in the league in a good matchup in one of the best game environments. Obviously, last year was number 1 in everything: receptions, yards after the catch. His efficiency was number 2, depending on the metric you look at. EPA, he was still expected points added, that is. Another efficiency metric, still number 1 there. Now, Kelce is the 3rd highest projected player in the blueprint and the 3rd highest owned player, but given his price tag, he's actually a worse value right now than Mahomes and Amon-Ra who go around him. So we've talked about the 3 most expensive players. The next guy will be a quarterback who's a step down at $9,400, Jared Goff, a fair price point in my opinion because he finds himself in one of the best spots for a fantasy QB. Still projected for a solid team total at 23.5, but a 6-point underdog means you're going to throw a lot closer to 40 times per game. And when you look at his weapons outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's working with a rookie running back in Jamir Gibbs and then a rookie tight end in Sam Laporta, the 2nd-round pick, as like his next most threatening option. So that is a concern, but you still have Amon-Ra there, and those guys should contribute because they're just going to have to. And it helps when you take into account that he'll have time behind that top 5 offensive line we talked about earlier, loaded with studs. Now, in 6 games last year, as a touchdown underdog with a 50-plus point total, we got a good sample here. He averaged 23 fantasy points, great, 37 pass attempts per game, and 294 passing yards per game. This is fantastic production for the price tag that he currently is. So I think Jared Goff is a nice option this week. If you could fit him, Mahomes, and Amon-Ra into a lineup together, it is pretty appealing. Now, despite thinking Jared Goff could have a good game, I think since he's going to throw nearly 40 times, he could also have an interception. He actually projects every time he throws for 37 or more times to have a pick in his career. So I take him over on Prize Picks, a half an interception. We compare that with the Dak proc we took earlier. We could pair it with the Mahomes one right here. Again, link down below. You get a free entry up to $100. All right, now let's slide back to some of the running backs on this slate. And we can start with a guy who's a fair price point at $5,600, Derek McKinnon. And this dude was a stud last season. He ranked number 1 amongst every running back in yards created per touch. His overall yards per touch was 4th, averaging 6.3 yards per touch. Fantasy points per opportunity. That's his carries and targets. Number 1. You name the metric. You could even see right here in all the receiving metrics, 4th in receiving yards for running backs, 9th in receptions, even had 10 touchdowns, which was definitely unsustainable based on his usage, but he had it. And Kansas City re-signed McKinnon this offseason because of that production. And despite being 31, he doesn't have the same wear and tear as a normal 31-year-old because of past injuries and just the way he's been utilized in his career. Now, he's not going to be the number 1 back on this team. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is now healthy and should be involved after making the team. Some cut speculations. Isaiah Pacheco is still there, will be the workhorse based on the 3rd preseason game's usage. But McKinnon should earn 4 or 5 targets in this game, which is great for the running back position in a PPR format like DraftKings. Even if they are 6-point favorites, the Chiefs still throw one ahead. Now, I've referenced the blueprint a couple of times, and you can get that on my Patreon link down below, the DFS blueprint. You could join nearly 1,500 members who are using it right now, and there's a couple different things you can do. You could just get the blueprint, which will have all the projections, ownership, stuff for showdown slates like captain, all the player notes, all that stuff. But if you want the optimizer as well for just $15 more a month, which is like one of the best prices, if not the best, you'll find in the industry, because I'm just a one-man business here. I don't have to pay a bunch of employees. It makes the overall cost for you guys stay a little bit lower. That's to join the Hall of Fame package. That is limited time. There's also a props tool there as well for this game. So you can check it all out. That is linked down below on the DFS blueprint. And also, if it makes it easier for you, because a lot more people are using laptops and also TVs like myself to watch these beautiful YouTube videos, you can click the QR code on the screen as well. Now, another running back is David Montgomery, the brand new Detroit Lion, who should earn a lot of early down work in this team. Last year, this Lions team led the NFL in opportunities in terms of rushing attempts, red zone usage, targets. Now it was split between Swift and Jamal Williams, but now David Montgomery should take that Jamal Williams role. And that was a great red zone role. It was by far and away the number 1 red zone role in the NFL last year. He had 45 carries inside the 10-yard line, Jamal Williams, which was nearly 50% more than anybody else. And he'll get a good matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line that is like league average. They lost Frank Clark. They lost some other guys this offseason. Chris Jones, as of this recording, which is the week of the game, has not signed his contract, so we expect him to join the team the next coming days, but if he doesn't, even better for this overall Detroit Lions team in the running game. Now, the downside for David Montgomery and why I haven't talked about him earlier is because they are 6.5-point favorites. I do think he's a solid pass catcher, but that's where Jamir Gibbs should come on the field more. They're saying Gibbs might operate as a receiver, so maybe both running backs are on the field. That's good. But Montgomery right now in the blueprint projects for like 9.5 fantasy points. At his price tag, he's just an okay play. Now, another guy who doesn't scream out, but the fact that it's a showdown slate makes his role a little bit more appealing, is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the wide receiver, the only clear starting receiver for this team because he was the only guy rested in the third preseason game. $5,400. He's interesting because he's locked into a role with Patrick Mahomes on a one-game slate. Now, when a Marquez Valdes-Scantling is highly owned, well, he's not appealing, but on this slate, he's not high owned at all. And we know what this guy's role is going to be. He had 20 deep targets last year. He was 7th in overall average target distance. If he can just connect on one or two of those, which there will be those targets in this game, they will take their shots in a nice matchup, well, he becomes a little bit more appealing. And for what it's worth, he wasn't awful at beating man coverage. There's actually like 5 or 6 overthrows last year that would have made his season look completely different from Mahomes, which is uncharacteristic for Mahomes. He was 37th in his route win rate and had the 24th most wins versus man coverage because of his speed, so he's actually quietly pretty good still at getting open. And that's something that he worked diligently on during his time in Green Bay with one of the best route runners, if not the best in the league, in Devontae Adams. Now, one player that I don't really want anything to do with is Rashied Rice, the second-round rookie. Gained some hype early on in training camp just because he's a rookie and people love hyping up these rookies, their new flashy toys, but he operated as like the wide receiver 6 in the final preseason game. Marquez Valdes-Scantling was rested. Guys like Sky Moore, Justin Watson, even Richie James was used ahead of him. And then there's Kadarius Toney, who should be returning from injury for week 1. He's expected to play, so Rashied Rice is buried down this depth chart. The next man up is the projected starter for the Chiefs at the running back position, Isaiah Pacheco, because he operated as the starter in the final preseason game where he made his debut. Now, there are some issues with Pacheco on the overall year. Jerick McKinnon's going to see the third down role, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire should factor in now that he's healthy. And this next stat is a huge red flag for Pacheco. He ranked 140th out of 145 running backs in pass protection last season. And if this guy's not going to be picking up blitzes or just protecting Patrick Mahomes, he'll be off the field quick. And Pacheco's not really going to project out for receiving game work with Jerick McKinnon out there being number 1 in yards created per touch last year and top 5 in receiving efficiency. Now, the good news is that this is a solid matchup. Last year with a 50-plus point total, he averaged over 11 points per game, which is fine at his current price tag. If he finds the end zone, he'll be worthwhile. So in the overall season, like in season-long fantasy, I'm not a fan of owning Pacheco, but for this one game in a good matchup to start the year, yeah, he should see around 15-plus touches. Now, we mentioned Kadarius Toney earlier. By all accounts, Andy Reid, everybody himself included, has been saying, yeah, Kadarius Toney's expected to play week 1. He had a minor surgery 3 weeks ago to clean up his knee. Now, this sounds major, but the cleanups are very quick recovery times for receivers. Now, the issue is he missed the entire preseason. He's never had a preseason with Patrick Mahomes since he joined the team later in the year in a trade last year, so where does he stand amongst the other starting receivers? The one good news is that when he's out there and healthy over 2 seasons, you can see he's only played 19 games, but in these games, he averages a 29% target rate. That's his targets per route run, which would rank top 5 during this time. But the story remains the same. Is he actually healthy? Will he have a limited role week 1? Will it just be kind of a gadgeted role, which is the major concern here? Now, a couple other deep values that I think are interesting is the rookie Sam Laporta at just $5,000. People probably don't want to play a rookie tight end. This is a different type of rookie tight end, was named the starter early on in the process, had strong college production, and will be a primary target in the middle of the field. And then there's another Detroit Lion in Josh Reynolds, who last season, this dude operated as the wide receiver 2, which he'll operate as in this game. And during that time, from weeks 2 to weeks 5 last year before injury, Reynolds averaged 13.5 fantasy points on 8 targets per game. He was a top 15 receiver over this stretch. But then he strained his back, missed like the next month of the season, and he was never the same. But Reynolds is now healthy at a fair price point on this showdown slate, and his biggest competition on the outside is going to be Marvin Jones in terms of getting playing time. And Jones, again, inefficient last year, now 33.5 years old. I would take Josh Reynolds here. Now, I'll throw one more play into an overall play that we can put together as a community entry for this one, and it's Sky Moore over 38.5 receiving yards. He's a starting receiver. Mahomes starting receivers last year averaged 53 yards, and those guys weren't anything great. It was MVS, it was Justin Watson, it was Juju. So I think Sky Moore is dynamic enough. We can review this. You have the Dak Prescott freebie in there if you haven't used it yet. You have Jared Goff's over 0.5 INTs, so he'll throw one. You have 16.5 rushing yards over for Mahomes, and then the over on Sky Moore, 38.5 receiving yards. Again, there's a free entry linked down below if you're not already a member of Prize Picks. Or similar to the DFS blueprint, which you can check out on Patreon, you can scan the QR code on the screen to quickly go ahead and sign up and get that community play right there on Prize Picks. So this is everything you need to know for this slate. I'll be putting out all the tools in the blueprint throughout the week. Any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Best of luck, and I'll see you all in the next one.